Welcome to this explainer. If you're a Brazilian military or police professional currently gearing up for your AMS exam, the assessment for mission service, you already know that communication is absolutely crucial. But today, we're zooming in on a really vital gap. We're going to break down the profound difference between the English used in modern domestic policing and international mission English. You see, domestic tactics often rely on immediate, aggressive verbal dominance. The goal is to force quick compliance, right? But international UN missions, they require a completely different operational mindset. Out there, your tactical English has to be highly specific, legally binding, and designed primarily for dynamic de-escalation, survival, and strict mandate compliance. Okay, let's dive into this. Today we're looking at 6 key phases. First, from parade square to the mission. Then we'll look at the paradigm shift itself, the tactical de-escalation funnel, the escalation of force ladder, real-world tactical field scenarios, and finally, we'll wrap up with cognitive load and consequences. Section 1. From parade square to the mission.
So let's start with what we all know, the baseline. For any seasoned operator, the training grounds and the barracks are a comfort zone. Traditional military training embeds foundational drill commands deep, and I mean deep, into our muscle memory. When we look at these baseline logistics and drill commands, the translation is actually pretty straightforward. You're used to barking out sentido, which translates to a sharp attention or 10 hut out in the field. Descansar becomes stand at ease. And these commands are highly effective for maintaining order, moving a platoon, or handling weapons on a parade square. But here is the hard truth for international deployments. While this vocabulary keeps your squad perfectly in line, it does absolutely nothing to de-escalate an unpredictable armed threat in the chaotic streets of a conflict zone.
Section 2. The paradigm shift.
And this brilliantly illustrates the pivotal turn of our analysis. The moment you leave the domestic barracks and deploy under a blue helmet, your rules of engagement and your communication undergo a massive transformation. Think about it. In a traditional military hostilities paradigm, or even in aggressive modern domestic policing operations, the objective is straightforward: overwhelm the target and gain immediate compliance through unilateral, shouted directives. But UN police and peacekeepers operate under the UN law enforcement paradigm. Here, the environment is totally asymmetric. Your primary objective is to protect civilians and uphold a mandate. Force must be proportional, it has to be graded. Because of this, your language shifts dramatically. It's no longer about just shouting aggressive orders to force compliance. It's about dynamic, bilingual de-escalation. Your words literally act as your primary operational shield, and international mission English requires absolute adherence to legal neutrality.
Section 3. The tactical de-escalation funnel. To really grasp how this dynamic de-escalation works in practice, we have to look at the framework governing every single interaction you'll have on the ground. Think of your interactions like a giant funnel, designed specifically to filter out the need for physical force. At the widest part of the funnel at the top, we have presence, your visible UN markings and patrols, naturally deterring conflict. Just being there matters. Next down is dialogue and mediation. This is where calming language is used to negotiate access. Now, if that fails, the situation naturally intensifies, and we narrow down to tactical verbal commands. This is where assertive, precise English establishes hard boundaries and demands compliance. It is only when all of these communication layers critically fail, filtering all the way down to the very bottom, that physical force is used. It is the absolute last resort. Your mastery of tactical English is exactly what keeps you safely in the upper layers of this funnel.
Section 4. The escalation of force ladder.
So, what happens when presence and simple dialogue just aren't cutting it and a structured escalation becomes necessary? Well, you have to climb the escalation of force ladder. This requires a rapid, highly calculated shift in both your vocal tone and your command structure. You might start out calmly at routine control with a polite, "move back please," but if a suspect becomes non-compliant, your voice has to sharpen as you escalate to an assertive command. "Let me see your hands," or "put your hands on your head." Notice that shift? From a polite request to a strict authoritative directive? If a weapon is suddenly drawn, you are immediately in the imminent threat zone. Your command becomes short, loud, and absolute. Drop the weapon, freeze. But before reaching that final critical step of lethal force, international protocols mandate a very specific verbal trigger. So the crucial point is this exact phrase right here. According to the UN Directive on Use of Force, if time and safety permit, you absolutely must issue this precise legal warning before employing non-lethal or lethal force. It identifies your legal authority, United Nations, it delivers a clear command, stop, and it provides the legally required warning of intent, or I will use force. If you don't broadcast this exact phrasing and instead rely on generic policing shouts, things you might say back home, you aren't just making a language mistake, you are risking a severe international legal violation.
Section 5, Tactical Field Scenarios.
Let's take this out of the classroom for a minute and apply it directly to the field. We need to see how these strict verbal frameworks actually save lives in high-stress, asymmetric operations. Imagine a really high-stakes scenario. A UN field hospital is taking direct gunfire from armed insurgents who are targeting medical staff. Your standard operating procedure here is to rapidly secure the perimeter and initiate an emergency evacuation. Amidst all the chaos and the sheer urgency of crossfire, your communication cannot be ambiguous. Your direct verbal command to the threat must cut right through the noise and be totally decisive. Drop the weapon, you are threatening medical staff. United Nations, stop or I will use force. See what you're doing there? You are establishing the crime, identifying your authority, and giving the final legal warning, all while managing your squad's defensive posture under immense pressure.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the contrast. Let's compare that active firefight with an interception scenario. Here, a UN ambulance is stopped by a local militia demanding to search the vehicle for weapons. Now, in modern domestic policing, a sudden checkpoint like this might immediately trigger drawn weapons and shouted commands to dominate the threat. But in international mission English, the officer uses highly specific, completely neutral vocabulary based heavily on international humanitarian law. They state, "I am a UN officer. We are neutral and unarmed. Under international humanitarian law, grant us safe passage." This just shows such a profound difference. The operator leverages international law as a verbal tool to secure safe passage, successfully de-escalating the checkpoint without firing a single shot.
Section 6, Cognitive Load and Consequences.
Surviving the tactical encounter? Well, that's really only half the mission. We have to transition to the immediate aftermath, which carries incredibly heavy responsibilities and strict accountability for the operator. Once force is used, the post-incident procedures are rigid, and I mean rigid. You have to ensure medical aid is provided to everyone. Yes, including the aggressors. Relatives must be notified, and full, highly detailed reports must be filed to promptly initiate an investigation. UN commanders are held strictly accountable, and the arbitrary use of force is literally a criminal offense. Remember, the English vocabulary you broadcast over the radio to your Tactical Operations Center, the TOC, during and right after the incident, that becomes the permanent legal record of your compliance.
Which brings us to this massive concept of cognitive load. When you're deployed, you aren't just a police officer or a soldier anymore. You carry a tremendous mental burden. At the center of it all, you have to maintain internal drill control over your squad. Then, in the middle ring, you're managing situational control, issuing tactical commands to suspects in highly unpredictable environments. And in the outermost ring, you're ensuring absolute mandate compliance, making sure every single action aligns perfectly with international law. Doing all of this under fire is difficult enough, but doing it in a second language? It means your English muscle memory has to be just as flawless and just as instantaneous as your sidearm muscle memory.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought as you prep for your AMS assessment and eventual deployment. You spend hundreds of hours maintaining your weapons, checking your body armor, and running physical drills. But if your communication is actually your primary weapon for survival, for de-escalation, and for legal protection, is your tactical English truly as sharp as your tactical gear? Take the time to really master this paradigm shift. If you do, you won't just pass the assessment, you'll protect the mandate, and much more importantly, you'll bring your whole team home safely.